The presenters on ECE site are myself. My name is Heidi Ames. I'm Director of Production Processes. As Ebony had explained, I have been working for ECE for 21 years now in various capacities. I'm involved in much of the evaluation process. I'm not an evaluator, so we have Jason Wessel, who is the evaluator on this presentation, and he's also the Senior Manager of Evaluation Staff, working for ECE for 25 years. We'll get started now with how our applicants apply for an ECE evaluation report. And it's slightly different depending on what program they are applying to. If they're applying to either ADEA CAPIDS programs or ADEA ADSES, they would start the application on those respective portals on the ADEA website. If they are applying for the ADEA PASS program, then they would start on ECE's website. We do have a web page on our site that describes for the CAPID and ADSES programs that our applicants should start in those portals. Once they start that application through those portals, they are presented with a link to ECE's web accounts so that they can continue the application on our website. If, again, they are applying for the ADEA PASS program, they will entirely do the application on ECE's website. They will not start at a different portal. This is true for both a new report application, or if an applicant had an application for us a year ago and completed the application a year ago, we consider that a copy request. It's for either of those situations, a new report, or they're coming back a year later, 2 years later, and they just want a copy of that previous report they had a few years ago. The process is the same. Like I said, during the ADEA application, the applicants will have a link to ECE's online account, which they click. They sign into that online account. At that point, the course-by-course evaluation, which is the evaluation they should choose, has already been chosen, pre-selected for them. They are asked to then provide their name, their address, their date of birth, the purpose of the evaluation, and they're asked to include their educational history, which is used later in the evaluation process. At that point, they will also be given our documentation requirements. They will display for them, and they will have to acknowledge that they have read and understand those documentation requirements. And then they submit the order through our ECE online accounts. The documentation requirements, just a bit more about them, because we feel it's really important for our applicants to know upfront before they apply what their particular country's documentation requirements are. We have these in various places on our website. Before they ever apply, they can see them. It is based on the country of their education. So they would choose their country of education from a drop-down list, as is shown here on this slide, and they would be displayed the documentation requirements for that country. This is just a snapshot. There's even a little bit more information about the documentation requirements from our website. It just didn't happen to fit on the screen. So once they have submitted the application to us, we have a staff group that looks to see that reviews the applications and looks to see, did we already receive documents from this person? So they may have gone ahead and gotten documents sent before they applied, and we want to make sure that we find those and match them up to this new application. But if not, because there are many times where they will wait to send the documents till after they apply, then we will just put the order status in waiting for documents, and we will wait for them to come. Once documentation arrives, then we assign the evaluator, and a review of the application and those documents will start. If the evaluator finds that we need additional documentation or additional information, they will contact the applicant. The applicant gets to see those status updates because that would be a status change, like their application is on hold for something in their online account. And their online account, they can visit anytime to see where we are in the evaluation process, what's the status of their evaluation. We also send out status notifications through their online account. Once we do have, so we will ask for additional documents. Once we receive all the documents we need to prepare the evaluation report, then the evaluation report should be completed normally within 8 business days. Once the evaluation is complete, a few different things happen depending on where a copy of the evaluation report is going. If it's going to an ADEA, CAPID, or access programs, it's sent electronically immediately once the report is complete, but it waits for a certain time later in the evening to get picked up by ADEA's service. If a copy of the evaluation report is going to an ECE dispatch registered institution, that is immediately sent to that system for pickup by that institution. If we have to mail the evaluation report, as is true for the ADEA PASS program, it will get mailed either that same day or the next business day. And it will be physically mailed on our safety paper. I'm going to hand it over to Jason Wessel now, who will talk about some specific evaluation information.
Okay, the first question that was provided is, are certain evaluators responsible for evaluations from certain countries, or are they all trained to evaluate any country? It's kind of a mixed response. When we train evaluators, the training normally, the initial training normally lasts 10 to 12 months. And during that training, we try to equip them so that they could pick up any application or any report from any country and be able to work their way through it. However, once they are trained evaluators, we have people specialize, and that's done based on a mix of their interests, their strengths, and then what ECE's needs are based on the volume of requests for that particular country. So going forward, most evaluators have a subset of countries that they specialize in. They might be in those countries essentially indefinitely, as long as they're evaluators, or certainly for several years. We try not to have them come in and out of countries too frequently, just because that can affect efficiencies and the like. But they are trained on any country to be able to handle any country, but then ultimately they do specialize in a subset of countries. Are institutions in other countries contacted is the second question. If so, what are some of the reasons they are contacted? Yes, we do contact schools, other governmental bodies, professional associations, examination boards, just depending on who's responsible for the types of credentials that we're reviewing. We will contact them for a variety of reasons. In some cases, we might receive credentials for a program that we may not have complete information on. There isn't information in printed resources or on the websites that are available, and so we might have to contact the institution to ask questions about a program or a credential. This doesn't happen quite as much anymore just because a lot of the documents we've already seen and the programs we've already seen, so we have a pretty good familiarity with them. A lot of the documents that we see nowadays are for recently completed programs, and oftentimes information about them is much more readily available. But we still do see documents for programs completed 10, 20 years ago or more, and sometimes the information about them is not as readily available, and in those cases we may need to contact authorities in other countries in order to get more information. The second, and perhaps at least in the past, more common reason why we might contact institutions is if we have concerns about the accuracy or authenticity of the documents. So once an evaluator has reviewed the documents that were submitted for evaluation, if the evaluator has significant or concerns or there are clear red flags presented by the documents or information in connection with the documents, then we would hold up the process at that point and contact the issuing institution or, if it no longer exists, something like a Ministry of Education in order to get information about the accuracy and authenticity of the documents. And the third question in this initial set of questions is, are all courses included in the grade point average? The answer to that is, in most cases, yes. When we provide a grade point average, we actually will provide two different grade averages depending on the performance of the student. If the student didn't repeat any courses during their full program, then we would just have one grade point average, and that grade point average would include all qualitative grades received by the student. Grades like pass on a pass-fail basis or satisfactory or withdrawn, unless they're deemed by that institution to have been failed, those aren't included in it because they don't really have a grade point value. But any grade that got a qualitative grade that ends up being the equivalent of an A, B, C, or D would be included in that grade point average. If the student repeated any courses, whether or not they were repeated because of failure or because they were trying to improve the grade, then our reports would normally and automatically include two different types of grade point averages that are labeled and defined. One of the grade point averages is the comprehensive grade point average, which is the one that would include all grades received. And then the second grade average that would be included in those particular cases would be a best results grade point average. And that essentially will include all grades except for grades for repeated courses. So for instance, if someone failed a course, later repeated that subject and passed it, the best results GPA would only include the final grade for the repeated courses as well as all of the other qualitative grades for courses that weren't repeated. The reason we do that is because over the years we've gotten feedback from different institutions that some institutions, their policy is to look at the student in terms of all the grades received, and so they want to see the comprehensive grade point average. Other institutions, their policy is to look at only the final grades that the student may have received for repeated courses. So in those cases, we include the best result grade point average. We do both so that depending on whatever the institution's policies are at the time, they have access to both pieces of information and they can choose which one to rely on based on what their policies are.
Thank you, Jason. Now I'd like to talk about some reported issues that we have heard from our applicants and from the ADEA users. First of all, we want to apologize for any issues you have encountered in the past. We have figured out what the issues are and how they occurred, and I want to talk a little bit about that. First, I'd like to give a little history that ECE has traditionally in the past stored our evaluation reports as PDF documents. And although we continue to do that, we are also now generating and delivering data associated with that evaluation. And because of a system change, we found that sometimes there was an issue with the data that was transferred to a new system. It wasn't with all evaluations from that old system, it was with a smaller subset. And this would only be a problem if we were processing a copy request of a report that was completed in that old system. These issues wouldn't be happening in our new system. A couple of those examples are that we might have a missing best result GPA. So you would only have, in this case, a comprehensive, and the best result might be missing. There would have been a large number of credits, so much so that you would say that can't be right, and it wouldn't be, like thousands of credits. And occasionally we'd see a year of completion in the future. So we have figured out how that happened, why that happened, and we are committed to not issuing reports with those issues any longer. We will be, if a copy request is ordered for a report that was completed in that old system, we will be doing a manual check for each of those reports with what it should be, with what it says, making sure that it's correct, fixing any issues before we process it. So we shouldn't be seeing that any longer, and I apologize if you've seen that in the past. As an example, those large credit amounts, if you're curious as to what can happen with data, is that when the factor for calculating the credits for those examples, it should have been a divisor factor, and it ended up being a multiplier factor. So it wasn't calculating the course credit total properly, and so those are the types of things that we will fix in the future and not allow to be processed. Which brings me to my next point, which is resources. First, I'd like to just mention that our applicants can contact us at any time during the evaluation or process, before, during, after, to ask questions or get clarification on anything. If they can do that by phone, we have a live chat system on our website. If live chat is not available, send us your question. We'll be in its place on the website, so they have those capabilities. And in their online account, they have the ability to send us a message through that and get their answer delivered through their online account. So those are the various ways that our applicants do all the time communicate with us. And I just want to mention that you are more than willing to communicate via the live chat, via submit that question on our website, or give us a call at any time. Our customer service staff are trained to handle calls from anyone. They would be happy to hear from you. They would know after they ask you what your question is, they will direct it to the appropriate person. If it's an evaluation question, they will forward you to the evaluator. If it's a technical issue of some sort, they would on your behalf contact our IT support team. So we would be happy to answer any questions you have at any time during the process. And I also have a URL listed if it helps. There's some FAQs on our website. As you can see from the URLs, these specific FAQs are written for the applicants, but I think there's a lot of good information that might pertain to you. We also have FAQs that are designed for the institution. but the questions answered there are more if you are ordering on behalf of the applicant, if you are an institution actually ordering the evaluation report. That's why I thought that I'd give you the individual's URL. You can also just go to our website, and through the menu system, you'd be able to find our FAQs if you didn't want to write down that URL. For question and answers, we received questions from the registration process, which we're going to answer. And then after that, we'll take any additional questions that you may have, and either I or Jason will answer them.
Thanks, Heidi. After the initial set of questions that we received, there was a follow-up list of 12 questions. Some of them are, not necessarily complicated, but can involve a good deal of information. I reviewed them and thought about them carefully, and so I've written up responses to each of them, and I'm happy to go through the questions and provide you with the information that I was able to gather in response to them. So I'll just read each question and then provide the response, and certainly if people have questions following up on that, we can try to answer those after I get through these 12. The first question is, how are transcripts authenticated? Do transcripts come directly from foreign colleges, or can applicants submit them? This varies depending on what is available. So depending on the country, we can use a combination of documentation requirements, direct verification or communication, sample documents, and then printed resources. And we use a mix of all of those in order to confirm whether the documents are authentic or whether they're acceptable for purposes of preparing a report. Our documentation requirements, we try to use the most secure method normally available within the educational system. You can't really have a one-size-fits-all approach to this. You have to look at each educational system and look at what's normally and reasonably available. Otherwise, there would be some cases in which you would never be able to prepare a report. So depending on the country, our documentation requirements is either we require either an original or university-attested document issued and submitted to us in a university-sealed envelope. That's kind of the top requirement that we have for countries where that type of documentation is reasonably available. In other cases, we would accept and review individuals' first issued original documents. In some countries, that may be essentially all they get, and so that's really all we can necessarily expect in many cases for certain countries or during certain time periods. We do not rely on scanned or photocopies submitted by the student. So it's going to be either some form of original document or university attested document with original ink from the university. We also will use, in some cases, electronic confirmation. We can get, for institutions that provide this, we can receive documents directly and securely from universities electronically. In some other cases, we can verify the content of documents using university-maintained databases when those are available. And in other cases, we receive documents directly from a central verification agency that's been empowered by the government of that country. We have a lot of sample documents. We have tens of thousands of documents on archive and verified documents in archive that we've collected over nearly 40 years. And against which we can compare credentials to make sure that they conform to what is expected for that school, that country, that time period. We can compare things like dimensions, color, safety features, wording, fonts, names, signatures, stamps, course titles, curricula, serial numbers, style, format, and a variety of other aspects depending on the particular country and the aspects of the document. And then we also will use verification, direct verification. If based on our review of documents submitted, we have any questions as to their accuracy or authenticity, we contact the school directly or whoever the issuing body is. If we're unable to receive a response to a verification request, or if the response confirms that the documents were altered or forged, then we don't issue a report. We notify the individual that we've received confirmation that the documents aren't authentic, and then we would also notify any third parties that the individual had designated as recipients of the report. We've confirmed more than one falsified case each month last year, and have already confirmed a number this year. And in those cases, we did not issue reports. Second question is, do you have any recommendations for evaluating transcripts from international dental schools? This one, I don't have, it's a fairly broad question. I'm not sure, it depends on the issue. We would likely have some recommendations, or at least be able to tell you what we do, so you could consider that. So if there's specific aspects about evaluation that you're wondering about, or if you have any questions that you're dealing with particular documents you've received, I'd be happy to try and answer those at the end of this session if you want to ask those specific questions. You can also contact us later, and we can try to field those questions from you. Just in general, my general recommendations might be is to collect resources, printed resources, online resources, bookmark pages that provide information about education in other countries. It could be the schools themselves, it could be the Ministry of Education. There are various governmental bodies around the world and other evaluation agencies that provide databases with information about credentials from other countries and schools. The other thing I would recommend is to maintain copies of all documents you receive, all educational documents you receive. We keep all of the documents arranged by country and school and year, so that at any point, if we get another document from that school in that time period, we can quickly go and look at samples that we've received in the past in order to make comparisons and to see how we've treated those programs in the past. Third question is, how does ECE establish course equivalency? And it kind of depends what is meant by course here. If you mean like individual subject or course within a program, we don't evaluate individual courses in isolation. And we don't really say that a particular course from, say, India is the equivalent of a particular course at a specific university here. Rather, we would evaluate all the courses within the context of the program or credential that they're part of, and then in turn, we would evaluate that credential within the context of its educational system. So I guess I can give you kind of a series of the types of questions we ask when we're determining U.S. equivalencies, which would affect equivalencies for the whole program as well as the individual courses. We would look at a range of things that really relate to the structure of the educational system at issue. What's the level of the education that's represented by the credential within its system? What is the admission requirement for the program? What is the U.S. equivalency of that admission requirement? What other educational programs is the person eligible for within the same educational system based on that credential? What are the U.S. equivalents of those programs? What professional rights does the individual have based on their credential? Who is the authority within the country that determines or bestows degree granting powers? What is the mechanism for receiving degree granting authority? Does the school that awarded the credential have degree granting authority? If so, when did they receive it? Was it after the credential was awarded or before? Does this authority extend to all credentials or programs at the school, or in that country is it given on a program by program basis? Are the courses completed part of a regular degree program, or are they non-credit courses? Universities in the United States offer both types of courses that can be credited towards a degree, as well as courses that are just for kind of continuing education and that could never be credited towards a degree at that institution. Those same types of courses are available around the world, and that's part of what we look at when we're determining whether a particular course might be the equivalent of a credit course in our judgment in the United States. The fourth question is, can ECE evaluations substitute for official transcripts? We do not recommend this. ECE is not a degree-granting institution. Our approach is that official educational documents are issued only by a duly recognized degree-granting institution that offered that course or program. So our reports are really an evaluation of the official documents, and we would recommend that they only be used in conjunction with those documents. When was your evaluation process last updated, and what changes occurred? research and collection of information is ongoing. We regularly review our evaluation policies and the supporting information in light of current cases. And all of our evaluators meet at least bi-weekly for policy meetings and more frequently if the need arises. We do all we can to preserve consistency and continuity whenever feasible, and we make substantial or fundamental changes to policy only if absolutely necessary and after careful and thorough review. So I don't, I can't give you a list of examples just in general. Certainly if you have questions about specific reports where you suspect there may have been a change in policy, we could review those and let you know what the issue was if there was a change in policy. But we try to, again, continually look at our policies, get new research, make sure it's incorporated into our process. And again, we try not to lightly change our policies. We like to maintain them consistently as much as possible, but sometimes in light of new information, the only correct thing to do would be to change it and not to continue with a policy that might not make sense based on new information that we've received. 6, explain how similar transcripts from same foreign dental school with same failure courses have totally different GPAs. I guess I would respond just kind of in the abstract. If 2 students completed the exact same program during the same years, sitting in the same classes, and received the exact same grades in each course, then their U.S. equivalent GPAs should be identical. In our experience, this rarely, if ever, happens. So in order to speak to specific cases, we'd have to have the reference numbers and have the opportunity to look at the reports and the related documentation. So, if you have specific examples that you have questions about or don't seem to make sense to you, we're more than happy to review those. We do that on a weekly basis. We get calls, emails, other messages sent to us from either third parties or students who ask questions about how we arrived at some type of equivalency, including grade averages, and we routinely respond to those and explain how we converted the grades and how we arrived at the grade point averages. And if we do discover that there was an error, we certainly correct those and reissue the reports. We've found that we don't have to do that frequently, but certainly, if there is an issue or if new information is presented, we don't want to maintain a report that may not be correct, and we will make changes to those reports within the lifetime of the report and issue revisions if necessary. But we frequently do respond to questions about all aspects of our reports, including the grade point averages, and we'd be happy to do that if you run into any cases that you have questions about. 7 is describe weighted averages between different countries. In other words, is a 3.5 GPA from one country similar to a 2.7 from another? When you use 3.5 and 2.7 there, it automatically says to me you're talking about U.S. equivalent GPAs. Although there are some countries that use a similar 4-point system, but we don't really weight GPAs differently depending on the country. The GPAs shown in our reports are U.S. equivalent GPAs, and they're all calculated on the U.S. 4-point scale after we have determined the U.S. equivalent credits and U.S. equivalent grades for each course. So we convert credits and grades for every course, and then based on those U.S. equivalent credits and grades, we calculate the grade average just as you would for any U.S. collection of courses. So if a student from country 1 or student 1 from country A, for example, has a U.S. equivalent GPA of 3.5, and student 2 from country B has a U.S. equivalent GPA of 2.7, then our position would be that the student 1's U.S. equivalent GPA is 0.8 of a grade point higher than student 2's. So in other words, at that point, if you're talking about U.S. equivalent GPAs, then it's at least at that point, it's more of an apples to apples comparison than an apples to oranges comparison. How do you verify the documents are official? Official, I guess it depends on, again, that's how you define that. I guess for us, it depends on the country, the school, and the time frame. And what we consider official is largely based on our, years of institutional experience reviewing documents. We also contact colleagues in schools overseas to confirm which are the official documents. We have a library of thousands of volumes on comparative education that include sample documents and information describing what the official document is, so we'll rely on that. We, generally speaking, we make sure that we use official documentation through a combination of our documentation requirements, the sample documents that we have on file, the verified documents that we have on file, online databases, both general and provided by schools, printed resources, and whenever feasible or necessary, verification services. The ninth question is, how do you ensure for authenticity and integrity with your evaluations? Again, I guess it's a combination of our documentation requirements, our sample documents, verified documents, databases, printed resources, and verification services. Anytime we have any questions about the accuracy or authenticity of the document, again, we'll hold up the process and contact the school for verification. When we have those serious concerns, we don't issue a report unless and until we receive confirmation directly from the university that the documents are accurate and authentic. In terms of integrity of our reports, each evaluator, and I think I kind of explained this before, but anybody who's an evaluator with us goes through 10 months to 12 months of initial training, and thereafter they participate in ongoing professional development. We have a staff of 8 senior evaluators with anywhere from 10 to 30 years of experience each, who are responsible for quality assurance, and that quality assurance program is done, is coordinated automatically through our production system. And then the senior evaluators do the actual reviewing and confirming of accuracy and quality for that report before it goes out. The 10th question is, how thorough is your research when reviewing institutions for accreditation? And there's a second, somewhat unrelated question. Are courses broken down by semester on evaluations? So the accreditation question, that is done on a country-by-country basis. Again, we're very careful and thorough in establishing either accreditation or degree-granting recognition, depending on what that country uses, as this is the first and main determination that we make because it impacts all of the rest of the evaluation report. If we confirm that a particular school doesn't have degree-granting authority or accreditation, if that school, or excuse me, if that educational system has an accreditation approach, then we would issue a report saying that this credential was issued by an institution that does not have the equivalent of U.S. Regional accreditation, and we wouldn't list the courses and credits and grades at that point. It's just simply an unrecognized or the equivalent of an unaccredited credential. For each country, we determine who is responsible or what is responsible in that country for establishing degree-granting authority. Then we determine via primary or other reliable resources whether the institution in question has received that authority, for what purposes, and when it was received relative to when the credential was issued. Certainly an institution can have degree-granting authority and it may have received it after some of the students had graduated, in which case, unless there's clear legislation in that country that says the degree-granting recognition or accreditation is retroactive, which in many cases it is not, then a student who may have graduated prior to that recognition, in our judgment, would have a credential that's not the equivalent of an accredited credential in the United States. In terms of the semester reporting, whether we break down courses by semester, we show the courses in our reports in the manner that they're reported by the degree-granting institution. We don't necessarily change the way they're reported by the official documenting institution. So if the courses are officially reported semester by semester by the school that offered the program, then they would normally appear in our reports as semester by semester. The 11th question, what factors contribute to the widely varying differences in GPA from different countries? In this case, that is Nigeria and India. The outcomes of a GPA can depend on a variety of factors, probably primarily the performance of the student. Another important factor is the grading system used by the university in question. Grading practices can vary widely from country to country and sometimes institution to institution within that country. Another issue that might account for it, which in many cases we have no way of objectively determining, is whether the professors in individual courses used criterion or norm reference assessment. Another important factor is how the program is structured, delivered, and reported by the university. So an example there would be a typical aspect from like South Korea for a dentistry program may report over 160 separate grades for a 4-year dentistry program, whereas a typical set of mark sheets from India may have less than 20 grades reported for the 4 years of study. So the very nature of the structure of the program, the way it's delivered, the way it's reported, in those cases can significantly affect what a GPA might be because of the number of grades that are going into that. If you have fewer grades going into it, you may have the likelihood that that particular GPA could be lower or higher, just depending on that particular student's performance. This is another one of those cases where to comment on specific cases, we'd really have to know the reference numbers and have the opportunity to review the reports and the documents, which again, we do regularly and we're more than happy to do. This is part of our ongoing review of what we're doing and confirming that what we've done is correct and trying to, whenever possible, improve what we're doing. So yeah, certainly anytime you receive a report and you have questions about any aspect of it, or you have questions about that report in reference to other reports you may have seen, again, we're happy to respond to questions you have about those reports or a report, either by phone or email or any other means that you want to contact us by. And then the final of the 12 questions is, I'm getting complaints from applicants that their GPAs are not calculated fairly. Please explain. Again, this would depend on the particular cases. I mean, we make every effort to evaluate education in a consistent and fair manner. We use evaluation policies that are based on, objective, accurate information that we, again, continually look to put together, and on basic principles of applied education. Customers and schools who receive our reports, again, can contact us at any point during the life of the report, and we can answer any questions related to the report, including about how the grades were evaluated and how a particular grade point average was calculated. So that's it for the 12 second round of questions that were submitted. Again, I'm happy to try and answer any follow-ups to these if you have them, or any other questions you had that you brought in or that occurred to you during this presentation related to evaluation reports. Thanks.